Hi designers, in this video you are going to learn how to create a design inspired by fall with three main parts. One is this duplicated and repeated image which has been colorized. I chose to use a candle for that area. The second area of your design will be an image that you have taken and are using for the background of your design. And you will also incorporate text. Let's get started. For my design, I decided to use a candle. You should choose an object that reminds you of fall or relates to this changing season. I love fall scented candles, but you could use something like a pumpkin, a gourd, an acorn, or even a cross-country shoe if that sport means fall to you. At this point, you're really an expert at creating a selection. So you can use any of the tools that you need to get that selection. I chose to use the quick selection tool. You'll want to make it sure that it has really smooth edges. Remember, one tool that's useful when using the quick selection tool is holding down Option on your keyboard. It changes it to a minus sign, and then you can delete part of the selection if you selected an area or a portion that you do not want. You will copy this selection by pressing Command C, and then you're going to create a new document. You'll go to File, New, and you want this document to be 8 by 8 inches. The resolution should be 200 pixels per inch, and you want to create this document in RGB color mode. You'll title it Last Name, First Name, and then Color My World. Okay, so you're ready to get started. Go ahead and paste the selection that you just copied into your document. You will want to transform this selection. And right now, I don't see the transform controls, even though this box is selected. So remember, the first step, if you don't see the transform controls, is to check that box. You can also go to View, click on Extras, and here we see the transform controls. I also have the grid up because I was using that in a previous project. So I'm transforming my object, I'm moving it to the center of my document, and I can tell that it's the center because you may have noticed this hot pink line sort of pops up on the screen. And then I'm pressing return to finish the transformation. I'm going to go to View, Show, and I'll take off the grid because I don't need to see that any longer. All right, so I've got it centered, and this is kind of a judgment call. You have to think about how big you want the object to be so that you will be able to copy it and rotate it 12 times to create a circular shape. So I'm looking back at the work I made, and I think that this is about the size that I would like. I'm going to copy that layer by holding down Control, duplicate layer, press OK. I've done this once before, so I'm just going to get rid of that layer, put it in the trash can. And in the center of my selection, we have what is called the anchor point. It's kind of small, but that is just leading towards the center of that selection. I want to move it down to the center of my canvas. So it's going to be somewhere around 4 inches by 4 inches. After I've done that, I'll hover over my selection, hold down Shift, and I want to have that arrow with kind of the curvy lines in between. And I'm going to rotate the candle or whatever image it is that you have selected 180 degrees so that it's really directly below and a mirrored image. Great, so I press Enter to complete the transformation. I'm going to hold down Shift, press Control on my Layers panel, and I'm going to merge the layers. This puts those two layers just onto one area. I'm going to repeat the previous steps because I could duplicate it one by one, but since I've already done some of that work, I just want to make it easier on myself. I hold down Control on the layers, click Duplicate, press OK. The anchor point is still in the center, so I don't need to do anything with that. I'm going to hold Shift while I hover over the corner, and now I'm just rotating it about 90 degrees. And I have 4 images of the candle. I'm going to press return to finish the transformation, go over to my layers panel, hold down Shift, have just those 2 layers selected. Now keep in mind, I still have the background layer behind all of this. I'm not merging it with the background, I'm just merging these 2 layers. Hold down Control, merge layers. Again, I'm going to hold down Control, duplicate layer, hover over the corner, hold down Shift. I'm turning it about 30 degrees this time. So now I have 8 candles. To get 4 more, I want to hit return, and instead of merging the layers this time, I'm just going to duplicate this layer with 4. And then I'm going to rotate that while holding down Shift about 30 degrees. You'll want to do this with whatever image you had selected, whether it was a leaf, a shoe, a candle, an acorn, so that you have this cohesive circle. Again, it needs to be 12 copies of that same image rotated in a circular shape. They should all fit on the canvas. If you've done something funky where the anchor point wasn't quite in the center and they're not all fitting on your canvas, you'll just want to redo that step before you move on. Okay, so I'm gonna merge all 3 of these layers. So again, I have 1 layer with 12 candles, and then I have that on top of my background layer. I'm gonna go to Image, Adjustments, and Black and White. There's more than one way to take the color out of an image, but for our purposes today, this will work best. So you can move around the percentage of each color in that image. You see adjusting the lightness and darkness or the value of that image, but you want to make sure that the number of each of the colors is something. You don't want it to be 0 or the colorization will not work well. Okay, so I'm happy with this black and white transformation. I'm going to press OK. And now I would like to select each individual candle again. Remember when you have a white background and then an image with some value in it, the Magic Wand tool works really well for this. So I select the Magic Wand tool. It's sometimes hidden underneath the Quick Selection tool if you are using that. I click on the background. Right now the inverse or the opposite of the candles is selected. So I go to Select, Inverse, and now I have my candles selected. Here is where we get to use the brush tool. So we don't want to use the history brush tool or the art history brush tool. We want to use this tool called the brush tool, which is just below the Band-Aid. Now you can be creative with this gradient that you create. There were some examples shown in class, and you could do something like an analogous gradient. You could work from one complementary color to another to create a gradient, or you could create a gradient of the full color wheel. I'm going to create a gradient from yellow to red. So I'm using yellow, and right now my brush mode is set to multiply. That's because I was working on it earlier. The preset is normally at normal, but if we do normal over the top, it's just filling it in. That's not what we want to do for the purpose of this project. We want to actually get that value and the texture underneath. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to switch the mode to multiply. You could also try color burn. Either of those work really well. I'm going to colorize my candle. And I know that I want the top one to be yellow and also the bottom one to be yellow to complete this kind of natural gradient. Next, I'm going to move my spectrum slider down a bit, and I'm going to use this kind of yellow-orange. I'm working this time with the color picker not right in the top right-hand corner, so it's a bit desaturated. That's totally fine. It's up to you how bright or saturated of a color that you want. What I'm looking for is that the images are fully colorized, so there aren't any white spots left. Something that might be helpful is changing the brush size, so you can make it larger or smaller. And again, I'm thinking about that gradient. Next, I'm going to move down to an orange. Go up just a bit. And then the last color that I want to use is a really saturated red. So if you forgot to use each part of the hue as you went along, you can go to your swatches and then you'll see the recently used colors. So I can find that sort of yellow-orange that I was using, or that orange that I was using just recently, and add it back in. Okay, so I'm really happy with this gradient. This might be something that you'll spend a little bit more time on, deciding what color scheme that you want to use, and then talking to your classmates or your instructor about how the flow is working. The next thing that you'll want to do is incorporate a background image. So you're going to make a new layer. It should be behind this wheel that you have created. Remember, if it's in front of it, it'll just totally cover it up. I'm going to press Command D to deselect those candles. And then I've already opened up this photograph that I took in New England in the fall. I used to live there and I just love the fall colors that are in this image, and it really shows the changing seasons. So I'm pressing Command C after I've used the rectangular selection marquee tool rather to select it. And then I'm going to go back to my work and I'm on the layer that I'd like it on. I press Command V. It's much larger than I want, so I am going to, although that's kind of cool with like the light showing through in the center, so I could keep it like that, or I could resize it a bit. And right now it's hard to see the candles on top of the background. There's lots of different ways that you could adjust this. You could make the candles less intense, or you can make the background less intense in terms of color. You can take out the saturation. So many things that you could do. So I'm going to go to Image Adjustments, and this is where you can have some creativity in what you want to do to make the background and then that circle have some contrast. For mine, I decided to take out most of the saturation, and then I actually made it a bit darker. Now I really see the candles pop, and I'm going to create a new layer for text. Remember, if there is a font that you would like to use and you don't see, you can always go to dafont.com and download it. So you can see I played around with the text in mine. I used some adjustments that you've learned about in class to add sort of a drop shadow to my text. And then I also added my name to the bottom left-hand corner. So I'll be looking for a background image, your colorized and rotated image that makes this perfect circle, text. If it's not your quote, you need to give credit to the person whose it is, and just a overall cohesive design. Great luck. I can't wait to see what you come up with.